Hey, the project we're going to start on today is for CHUCK Dearborn, and it's going to be a relatively complex thing to just to figure out what we want to do. But here's what I wanted to show, this picture of what we're doing. We're trying to do a restoration of some of the parts, in this case the little half fairing and the tank, for a Yetman Honda. Now, the Yetman Hondas have a unique frame. It's patented. And I did a little research just to figure this out, because both Chuck and Art Conklin, as well as some of my other friends like Ray, of course, we all used to race in AAMRR. And we all kind of knew of each other, but we weren't really intimately involved back then. But it seems like now that years have gone by, and I'm doing some of these restorations for some of the guys. And we did one, my God, for Alan, we restored his old race bike. This is going to be a fun project, and I want to get started on it today. Let me just show this picture so you can see what our ultimate goal might be. So I wanted to show a little bit of the what this bike should look like when it's done. Now, these are the parts as they came. Art Conklin was over here the other day, and you can write your name in the parts, which doesn't mean a thing. We got to super clean these, of course. And there's two parts to this. Repainting this part will not be a big deal. This is a fiberglass part, and much like the little half fairing that we had, the Bultaco fairing for my original race bike that Ray Straub has now, this will be an easy one. I'm not too worried about this. But here's the reason I wanted to put this video out today. This gas tank is 50 years old. It's a fiberglass tank. It has little metal brackets which we'll pull these off and wire wheel them down. Get that nice and clean. We'll take the petcock off. It's got, and I don't know if there's a leak there or if that's just a cosmetic thing, but it has the look of some primer Bondo there. We're going to try to do that. Of course, cleaning it is step one. Now, and I wanted to share some information. The reason I'm putting this video out as early as I did is the day Art brought this over here, we discussed for several hours. The painting of the tank is not a big deal. That's a relatively straightforward thing, no matter what color Chuck would like to make it. Here's what is complicated. When a tank sits for 50 years, you look inside and it's a toilet. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there. Now, what I don't know, to be perfectly candid and honest about this, and of course I can polish the cap up, that's no big deal. I've asked several of my friends, CHUCK DEARBORN, and he's very knowledgeable, has a bunch of dirt bikes, and one of the things he said, his dirt bikes, if you remember back in our videos, we restored his OSA for him, and among other things, that tank did have a sealer in it, which I've never done. I'm more prone to replace the tank than to seal it. But again, in this case, this is the original part. There may be some intrinsic value to that as we restore the project of having, and I liked having the original tank on my race bike, even though it had issues that Bondo takes care of everything in this case. But because this is fiberglass, just a little history of some of the composite information that I know very well, in fact. Now the point is, and I wanted to share this, here's what I'm hoping is going to happen. I'm hoping somebody's going to see this video today, because I put this video out. I normally am about 5 to 7 days behind on putting videos out because I have to edit them. But I wanted to put this out right away because I'm hoping I'll get some feedback from people that have experience with fiberglass tanks. In this case, this tank is 50 years old. Well, here's what I know for sure, and it's not something to be taken lightly. 50 years ago, when they made products like this, the issue that they had was the resins of the day were nothing like the resins that we have available now. And I know that from making model airplane propellers, from making exhaust pipes for two-stroke engines, especially the alcohol model airplane engines that get up to 500-degree exhaust. What I do know about these older resins is, and I don't know, see, taking the paint off of this tank, if this were a metal tank, we'd spray on aircraft paint remover and wipe it off and be done with it. Well, not that easy with fiberglass because a lot of the paint removers, the chemicals eat into it and they soften it up. Yeah, no, the fairing, it doesn't matter. We can just sand it down. And I'm afraid to just take 80 grit sandpaper and a sander and sand this because it's a relatively thin. When I looked at how thin the material was, and it could be, it's thin, it's obviously thin because they want to keep the weight down. But so I'm in a quagmire, and the first thing I wanted to do is I'm going to put the tank aside to dry today. To dry. I'll just wipe it down with some simple green, clean it up. But until I get more feedback of how we're going to actually clean and seal this tank. Now, the sealer, they recommend putting a quart of acetone in here and some nuts and bolts and doing this for half an hour. The problem with that, there's two problems. If it softens up the tank, where it's going to soften it up is at the joint, and it's going to leak. And you can throw the tank away if that happens. You're almost guaranteed not going to seal it up. And I don't know, these sealers, when they don't stick to the wall of the tank, it's worse than having dirt in the tank. So again, this is an area I'm hoping when somebody sees this video, they'll let Chuck know, Art know, or myself, or Chuck Barron will come up with some magic solution and put it in an oven and bake it or something. But it's something new, and I'm going to have to look out on YouTube, of course, and see if I can come up with some more information. So by putting this away for right now, the second part of this day is, and I've been working in such a way in the shop that because we're babysitting every day now and doing other things, working on other projects and doing Karen stuff, I have a gap of an hour here, an hour here, an hour here. And I do have about 2 hours right now. And I thought I'll try to get some of the paint off of this part because what it'll let me see is this older paint. And again, this might be 50-year-old paint. If the choice would be right now, you could take this out in the backyard, just roughly sand it with maybe 400 or whatever, 320, prime it, and go right over this old paint. It probably would be okay. But I want to know what kind of paint this is. Because there are combinations of paint. And here's a good example, something that doesn't work. And I proved it because I was playing, for Karen, I was doing a tray that the cups go on in our kitchen. I sprayed it with Rust-Oleum and I said, I remember if you put that clear on the next day, it melts the Rust-Oleum. It makes a mess. Or it doesn't dry. I remember the other problems. But if you wait a week, it's fine. So what I did just to prove it, she had 2 parts to paint. I put the Rust-Oleum on. The next day I put some clear on, and sure enough, it just turned to alligator skin, and I could peel it up with a razor blade. And I said, okay, I sanded it back down. And what I did it the second time, I put the Rust-Oleum on, put it up by a heating vent for 3 days. The clear went right on beautifully. So this was just some information to pass on to people. But you can see here's what's actually happened. If you look real close, I gotta get some of the dust off of this. The paint that's on top here, this blue, did that alligator skin thing. So I don't know what I have here. But I'm kind of prone. I'm going to try a couple different ways to try to get most of it off if I can. Now this is in our kitchen. This is this little part I did with Rust-Oleum for Karen, and I had to redo it actually. And it's information we've shared in the past. Luciano has shared it. I've tried to share it. But when you do let it dry, you can see what a beautiful finish that has. And it's just a little part of the accessories that we make on this. And we try to do these things. We're always doing something in the house. But Rust-Oleum is wonderful stuff, but when you put the clear on and let it dry, and if you can put it up by a heating vent, even better. And that combined with Rob's bike that he did the silver Rust-Oleum, it even gives us a little bit better of a database to work with. Now this is not related to our paint job, but a little funny side note. These little brackets, when we had the granite done in the kitchen, the guy that did it, an Italian guy, that he had these made out of granite, and he wanted $200 a piece for them, and there's 4 of them in the kitchen. And I looked at it, I said, $200 a piece, I could buy a motorcycle. I could have 4 motorcycles in my collection. So what happened is I went to the store, bought, these are plastic, and Karen, with her art background, painted it to match the granite, and I put clear on top of it a couple days later. And people that are in the kitchen, even the guy that installed the granite had no idea. And he thought, oh, you went somewhere else and bought the granite ones. Because what they used to do is the scraps from the granite countertops, they'd make these for you. They'd machine them out. So it would be a perfect match. That looks good enough for me for $800. Now, I always put this on all the videos of all the paint jobs you can do. The one mistake, the biggest single mistake you can make is to take something that you're going to paint and do this. Grab a piece of sandpaper and sand it. The reason is, I don't know what fingerprints, grease, oil, dead bugs, whatever's on here. Obviously, it is dirt. But whatever's in this, there's always some silicone from your hands touching it. And when you sand that in, you sand and press that down on a molecular level down into the paint. And at some point in time, it can come up and bite you. So my suggestion is, anything you're going to restore ever, no matter what it is, doesn't matter what part. Step one, take some good old Simple Green, which seems to be the best of these solvents that I've found. And by the way, it's the cheapest too. And if you don't like the smell, Simple Green makes lemon Simple Green, which I got a gallon of that the other day. Because when I use this extensively in the house to clean things, what happens is she has allergies and things, and she doesn't like the smell of Simple Green. So I don't mind the smell at all when I know how much nicer this can be, or how bad it can be if you skip this step. So anyway, what I'm going to do is put the tank aside to dry today and spend the 2 hours trying to work on the other part. At least I'll be that much ahead on this. And Alan Albert, when we did his bike, we did the frame, we did the gas tank and the fairing and everything. And I thought, wow, it did my heart good to see these old AAMRR racers. Alan has since gone on to a couple of races. I think he got second at one of the races. So I just, bringing these old bikes back to life, this really floats my boat a lot more than going to Motorcycle Mall and spending 30 grand for something 10 other young kids have. It's just not the same thing. Anyway, if I'm just going to do that, just to get some of that silicone off, and if you don't think the stuff comes off, it comes off. What I'll do is I'll do that about 3 times an hour or so apart, so this will just get cleaned up. I'll rinse it off. Then I'm going to put this aside until I actually can get together with Chuck and with Art. And again, what's fun about these old AAMRR racers, whenever we get together, we have a bull session. We go through a gallon of coffee and eat 100 donuts, and it always turns out to be some good memories. Those days in AAMRR, for anybody that's too young to have experienced them, they were really a lot of fun. I know Ray has endless stories. Freddie Anderson, it's when Frank was alive, he would always go back and talk about days he had gone to the races and helped his brother and everything. And this is a real AAMRR bike. So when I looked up the patent, I didn't actually look it up. Turbo Steve looked it up, I think. I don't remember, because I got a lot of feedback when I first put this out on the internet. The guy's name was Y-E-T-T-A-N, Yetman, but they call these bikes Yetmans. Don't ask me why that is. Maybe he was Polish like me. I don't know. But again, all of these parts, and by the way, here's another thing. The way these parts are made, if you start doing anything in here and you catch one of these little razor blades under your fingernail, bye-bye. It can ruin your whole day. So, Simple Green, do it about 3 times, let it dry in between coats, then I'll take it over to the sink, rinse it real well. Simple Green is one. Simple Green gets chain lube off. I've had good luck after kerosining a swing arm down. It gets the chain lube off. And you know, one of the biggest things people have trouble with, they see a bike that's whistle clean, and they want to clean their bike, and they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to take that paint stick and wrap a rag around a microfiber, or they try to use up old bath towels instead of microfibers, or they do a lot of things to make it difficult. When you have the right supplies, it's relatively easy. And every time I do this, you just can see how much stuff comes off. But yeah, there was a problem with this paint already. But when we're done with it, it'll be even worse. Now, after wiping this 3 times, and by the way, this is the lemon Simple Green that has a different smell. I don't know if it's any better or worse. before I start sanding this or trying to get the paint off with any number of chemicals can take this paint off, because we don't really know what kind of paint it is. And when you're dealing with old fiberglass, boy, you just can't be too fussy. Now another thing too, it could be, I don't know, the way this is made with the stuff they make boats out of, this might even be polyester resin. This part's relatively heavy. This part's heavier than a gas tank. If it's polyester resin, again, you still have to, chemicals are funny. And some of these old materials, if I were to melt this part, this is going to be a difficult part to find on eBay, that's for sure. So the first and the easiest thing to try here is I just put a little bit of acetone on a paper towel. That's going to tell me if this paint is going to be able to come off. In fact, look, it's coming right off. And the only thing with acetone, you don't want to breathe too much of this in the house, but it's pouring rain outside, so I'm just going to do a little test here. I don't want to stink the whole house up. I don't want to overdo it either. I'm trying to wipe it off and not let the, look at how that's coming off. It's coming off relatively quickly. But what it's telling me, it's telling me that this is more than likely lacquer. Because lacquer thinners will take it off just like acetone will, but if I can get most of this off, I jury rig the whole process, that there's a good chance that the paint that I'm going to put on here, and there'll be a lot of hours of getting this to be real nice, is not going to be wasted or squandered. And again, I got 2 gallons of acetone. I might need 2 gallons just to do this. But this is a lot better for the part, and let me show you why. When you're dealing with 50-year-old parts, as you start peeling back the onion, here's what happens. And it's a good thing to show this. See, this part has already been sanded through in spots. Now, if I were to just paint over this, Bondo over it, there's a good chance that this is not going to work. Well, we're going to have problems. But if I get it down to at least here and I sand it, a much better chance I'll have a nice finish. And this bike might ultimately be in a museum, you know, up in that museum in Newburgh. This would be a perfect bike for that museum. And the trick here, believe me, is to try, the 2 things you don't want to do is put so much acetone on that it may go down and hurt the material underneath it. But you can't really try to economize and save money on acetone. Acetone now is relatively inexpensive, I guess, relative to paint remover it is. And you've got to put enough on, and there's a magic number. You get enough on, it softens the paint, and then you've got to go get a brand new paper towel and get it off, because the paper towel gets pretty ratty real quick. But we got 2 hours here. I got about an hour and a half left that I can basically go through this. I have a couple of rolls of paper towels, and I got 2 gallons of acetone, and by the end of this, I hope I have most of this off. But I can see already underneath here that what I'm dealing with here is not going to be a pristine part. It's going to require a lot of sanding to get this down. And this is a part that has gel coat on it. So it tells me it's more than likely polyester resin. And that accounts for why it's so heavy. And I also was trying to think of, now we got make a little windshield here. I'm sure you can't buy it on eBay, but I was thinking maybe could use a face shield or something to make that windshield. Might be real interesting. Or if somebody out there would like to donate an old windshield with a crack in it or something, we could, I think Luciano had a couple of old windshields, or maybe Turbo Steve's got some, that we can fashion up a little windshield for this. I'll make a pattern, and right now, there's no point letting the camera run. We're just going to go through the rest of this gallon of acetone and get this as clean as we can. But this is the least amount of chance that you're going to ruin the part, especially when it's a collector part that you just can't go get another one if you screw it up. Now the next tool to get some of this off, and again, I don't want to just keep soaking it with acetone. Now, because what happens with this is once you do a certain amount, the sandpaper deteriorates. You turn it around and use the other point, of course, and you can continue right on. Now, the final thing before we move on to the next step, I want to wet sand this all down. I got some simple green in the water. I just want, this is 220, I'm roughening it up, and then I'm going to do a final sanding with 400 before I put the primer on. I'm not sure I'm going to get to do the priming today because it's pouring out there. Who knew how much fun we could have in this rain, but now, once I get to this point, I want to start feeling around if we got any really rough spots here. If we do, there's a simple solution. There is no simple solution to anything here. I need a bigger piece of sandpaper. Let me get a block. Always good to have the wood block. Again, if I find, in fact, I find here a hard block first, soft block second. And this will bring the shape just the way it should be. Even though we're going into 5 different materials here. Gel coat, what's under the gel coat, the material. It looks like what they did is and I used to do this with the polyester resin parts I made, cowlings for model planes and stuff. You put the dye right in the gel coat. And so what you have here is black gel coat. That's what it looks like anyway. But 50 years ago, who knows what they were thinking. Mr. Yetman, Yeti, how did they say his name? Anyway, interesting, the history of motorcycles since we've been to Dale's Museum in Newburgh. Motorcyclepedia, and that's on our videos. I've gotten a couple of trivia books and I've read up on things that maybe I would never have known. And I'm going to try to see if anybody else out there knows more about these particular bikes. I went out and looked at the photos so I could get some thumbnails for my videos, and they look really, really cool. They really have that old school, which I guess you got to like old school. If you don't like old school stuff, if you want to have a modern bike, well, nobody's going to hate you. It's a lot of work to have one of these. Anyway, after this step, it'll be 400, and a part will be pretty much ready to prime. Now these are these little polywog shapes. They're made out of relatively hard rubber anyway. And what you do with these, where this comes in handy, is to get in this groove. See, any low valley is where the paint is going to tend to peel up. So we really want to get down in that valley and get out as much of this old finish as I can possibly get. Now what I realized this is, and I looked at it real close here, it looks like that they put a gel coat in the mold. Obviously it's made in a mold. It's gel coated, but as soon as you sand through the gel coat, it's e-glass. So that's really it's an inexpensive way of making a part, that's for sure. Unlike modern parts that are made out of carbon fiber and epoxy, polyester parts and e-glass are relatively inexpensive. The other thing that's important here, and I wanted to make sure I mention this, is always, before you even put the prime on, get the edges. Radius the edges. Again, that's where paint will start to peel. If it does, it's going to start peeling at an edge. Think of a phone book. If you want to tear a phone book in half, you got to tear the cover first. If you can't tear the cover, you can't tear the phone book. Pretty cut and dry. And these little polywogs that come in all different shapes and sizes, and a couple of my modeling friends have commented lately that they've been so useful. Doing little, and they're just like this. You could do some of this by hand too, but the polywogs just make it way easier, way easier. And getting in all these little corners and edges. Again, usually a part like this, actually it's not a part like that, any part. This kind of work is strictly a labor of love. When you see those custom cars in California, and they, you know, one of the famous guys is doing a job, they don't show you the amount of hours. The poor guys in the back that you never even see on a movie, bring in the stunt double, you know, and the guy spends 8 hours sanding a fender or something. But now with the soft block, the final thing will be soft block out the whole part. We've got everything etched real nice. We should be able to get a really nice coat of primer on this if it stops raining. And as I said, I'll put this out ahead of time, try to get some feedback from the people I know that deal with that. Because imagine you put this amount of hours, I'm almost 2 hours into this already. To put this amount of time and the energy, we've got 2 gallons of acetone into this already and 2 rolls of paper towels, and you start adding it up. You don't want that whole, and not to mention how much muscle work went into it, but you don't want to have that and then have a piece just go, or an edge peel up or something. So, you got to clean that up, dry it up, and we're ready to prime. And now the last step on this is going to be to degrease it, which by now is just an extra, just a almost overkill step. But we really want to make sure that all of the effort that goes into this part does not get wasted with, because once you have a problem, you pretty much have to go back to the beginning and do it all over again. Like building a house, if you don't put the foundation in well, you know, the 3 piggies come to your house and that's the end of it. Now another little tip that a lot of people, it goes right over the head, I think. Part's ready to prime. Let me just put that over there for a second. But now you got this towel. It's got sanding dust. It's got all this stuff on it. Here's the trick of tricks. Take this outside, shake it. That gets rid of the loose dust. I fold it up first so that I don't get the dust in the house any more than is already here. And my work table is, I'm just going to put this out here. I'll take that out later. My work table is all the old towels. Whenever we buy new towels for the house, I, of course, inherit the old ones. And as I use them, once I use one, it goes in the laundry. It'll go in the laundry. When I get down to the last few, and what it does, it makes for a nice, soft, padded table. Or if you're at a garage sale and you see somebody's throwing their towels away, you can buy them for a nickel a piece. So what I'm saying is this is a great way to make a workbench. I always like to work by a mirror, then I can see both sides when I line tape and things up. I got the mirror out of a garage sale too. But everything in this shop is really just improvised. We don't really have any high-tech workbenches or anything. But this is a table, if you're going to do this kind of work, that the next time we sand, I'll just peel this up, put that in the laundry. And that makes it very, I've been looking for the part. It makes it very easy to do this kind of work. And now I'm starting, when I bring this in and ready to sand the primer, I'll be working off a really nice clean table with no dust. And second, I don't have to breathe that dust in either. Look at this as I speak. The sun comes out. The rain, it did rain most of the day. I got to dry up the table. Look at this. It's Chuck's lucky day. The primer I always prefer, Rust-Oleum self-etching primer. Light coats. What a miracle that it stopped raining here. If we didn't have to babysit today, this would be probably go out an hour from now and go right. But it was Chuck's lucky day. First day on the Yetman project, and it looks like we got one of the parts under control. We will find out very soon. A couple days, have the email and see what Chuck and Art decide to do with that tank. We will be glad to do it however they want. So we basically have to repeat all the finishing steps that we did on this. Oh, that's going to be peachy keen. So in a matter of about 2 hours, and I think we're well on our way to bringing this part back to where it's going to be a really neat bike that might bring somebody a lot of joy and happiness. I know all these restorations make me happy. I wish that the thing I'd really like to bring back is the time we had at the AAMRR races. And I'd like to bring Kenny Augustine back and Frank Straub and that part. good chance that's not going to happen. But the bikes, as we can get them, and hopefully this will make Chuck a lot more passionate about having his bike. It like Alan's bike that we did 2 years ago. May change his whole life. Who knows? So it's about 20 minutes later. We got a second coat on there, and that looks like when that cooks up, I'll let it sit out in the garage overnight before we could work on it again. But for us, it's pretty much the end of the day, and it's time for us to go get Miles. You know, no matter what your involvement or interest in motorcycling is, there's something to be said for having older bikes. Now, we have 4 historically registered bikes that hopefully we've brought back from oblivion, and we're going to add this one to the list very soon, I think. Again, we don't want to do anything with that tank to hurt it. I want to be very conservative. But after that's done, putting a nice finish on it, that's something we can do. And no matter what bike we've ever restored here, the one thing I always appreciate, and it's a thing that my friend Andy Lee told me one time, and it stuck with me. He said about old bikes, and he had a GS exactly like mine. With the old bikes, there's one thing about them. You just can't go to the store and buy one. And maybe that's why when you go to these motorcycle gatherings, so many people run over and look at Alan's bike and Turbo Steve's bike and some of the ones that have been brought back. Luciano's H1, always a crowd pleaser. They're all fun. Mark's bikes. I love working on all of them. Anyway, we're going to add this to the list, Chuck. Go do your research on that tank, and we'll pick that up within the next couple of days. I hope you enjoyed watching, and of course, if you love old motorcycles, and who doesn't? Let's face the fact, who doesn't? Thanks for watching.